Today we're looking at stat lines across all of NBA history that'll make you just stop and say, what? Stat lines where most have only ever happened once, and there's a good chance they'll probably never happen again. And not all of these are necessarily impressive, but just weird ones that would really turn some heads. Oh, and also we're not including any from Wilt Chamberlain or Bill Russell because they take every spot in the video. First though is Scott Skiles, who most people just know today as the guy that holds the record for the most assists in a single game with 30. In today's game, it's impressive enough if a player even gets 20. As a matter of fact, there's only ever been one 25 assist game in the last 29 years. But we're not just here for the assists. The stat line that Scott put up that night was not only the 30 assists, but he also had 22.6 rebounds and 2 steals. I mean, to be that efficient on a night makes no sense. You'd think when having 30 assists, he'd have no other stats on the board, but the fact that he had 22 points makes you really wonder what got into him that night as a dude that only averaged 7 points and 4 assists on the season that year. That'd be like a player like DJ Augustine just coming out and setting the all-time assist record today. He also only averaged 11 and 6 for his career. It just would have made a lot more sense if it was from a guy like John Stockton, and he held this record because in his career he had a 29, 28, and 27 assist game, but never 30. And all of this combined is what makes this one just really strange. Nobody has ever heard of former NBA player Stephen Hill, but apparently he's a living legend because he only played one game in the NBA for his entire career, and in it he only played 2 minutes, going 1 of 1 from the field and getting 3 rebounds, giving him a career PER of 88.3, which is triple the all-time leaders in Michael Jordan. So assuming you took off minimum game requirements for this stat of PER, Stephen Hill would be at the very top of the list. We all know Manute Bol though, and even though he didn't have a very long career, at least it was longer than 1 game. And obviously he was 7'7", so he was a shot blocker, and was never really anything more than that. So of course that led to some pretty unusual stat lines. Like the time he had a game with 4 points, 4 rebounds, and 15 blocks, which on paper just looks really weird no matter who the player is. But given the fact that it was Manute, it makes perfect sense. And none of these stats were even too strange for him as a player. I mean, sure, the 15 blocks was a lot, but he had double-digit blocks a lot in his career, especially early on. But he only averaged 2 points and 4 rebounds for his career. I just really don't get how you're that tall and can get 15 blocks, but only 4 rebounds in a single night. I guess though when you think about it, it probably does make sense. But then again, I also say that as he once had a stat line of 10 points, 19 rebounds, and 15 blocks, which is even more impressive and just like a miracle for him. Allen Houston was a good scorer for the Knicks for most of his career. And well, in the 2001 season, in a game against the Timberwolves, Houston had a pretty unique night when he scored 37 points and put up 0 rebounds, 0 blocks, 0 assists, and 0 steals. So literally the only thing he did that night was score the ball. But it's okay because not only did they get the win that night, but he did it on 16 of 20 from the field, which is 80%. So there's no wonder why he kept shooting. It's just weird though. This doesn't happen very often, and it makes sense. How do you not catch a random ball coming off the rim and get a rebound, or get double teamed and see an open teammate and get an assist? A few years later though, Damon Stoudemire tried to one-up him, and even though he didn't get the zeros everywhere, he got close, and he did it with 54 points actually, and put up a stat line of 54 points, 0 rebounds, 0 blocks, 1 assist, 1 steal, but also had 0 turnovers, which might even be more impressive. And you be the judge now of what's more odd, either of those games or the one CJ Watson had back in 2013. At the time, he was a role player for the Indiana Pacers, and he played 9 minutes off the bench. Well, in that 9 minutes, he managed to record a stat line of 1 point, 1 rebound, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block, and 1 turnover. And listen, no NBA player out there could accomplish this even if they tried, which is also why this is the only instance of it happening in NBA history. To get the 1 rebound and assist, okay, I get that, but the 1 steal and block as a 6-foot guard is pretty tricky. Adding in the 1 turnover makes things even more complicated, but then to only attempt a single shot, get fouled on it, then miss 1 free throw brings the odd of this happening ever again up to an astronomical number, which is why it probably never will. A not so humorous stat line comes from Kenyon Martin in Game 6 of the 2003 NBA Finals, which was an elimination game for the New Jersey Nets. And at the time, Martin was the 2nd best scorer on the team, behind Jason Kidd, averaging just about 20 and 10 on the year. Well, in that Game 6, he put up a stat line of 6 points and 10 rebounds on 3 of 23 from the field. And to have this in a finals game is something you just don't see. The 3 of 23 shooting though was thanks to defense from Tim Duncan, and that put him at 13% on the night, which was one of the worst single game playoff performances in NBA history. A little more recently than that, James Harden had a pretty crazy night. Well, it was actually back in 2013 when he was really just starting to heat up on the Rockets, and we all remember Rockets James Harden and the phase he went through where he would just get free throws every single possession, and that happened in a game against the Memphis Grizzlies. In that game, Harden finished with 2 made field goals, but 27 points, thanks to him going 22 of 25 from the free throw line. So he took a lot of shot attempts, but Memphis fouled him on nearly all of them, which is why he officially only finished the game with 2 made shots. On the night as a whole, he was 2 for 9 in total, so he actually did miss 7 of them, and I'm sure he just realized he was having a bad night, so he decided to draw fouls every play. And this is a crazy stat line that the refs obviously deserve a shout out for. Now, when speaking of the weirdest stat lines we've ever seen, at least for me, one player always comes to mind, and that's Dennis Rodman. He had a ton of them throughout his career thanks to his historic rebounding ability and offense that was limited to only layups. So it led to a lot of weird nights in the NBA. I think the stat that defines him is that he had 7 different nights where he had 20 plus rebounds and 0 points. And out of those, his best was when he played for the Spurs and recorded 28 rebounds and 0 points, which was also just a few days after he had a 25 rebound 0 point game and another 23 and 0 game. And listen, no matter how bad you are on offense, this just seems hard to do. It's almost as if he was trying to get 0 points, but that really just was the kind of player he was. And speaking of not scoring, back in 2017, Draymond Green recorded the only ever triple-double without points, where he had 4 points, 12 rebounds, 10 assists, 10 steals, and 5 blocks. The triple-double was already crazy enough, but then when you throw in the 5 blocks in there too, it takes this night to a whole different level. He really was only 3 made shots away from recording the league's first quadruple-double in years, but the fact that he didn't do that is what makes things so strange. And I mean, 10 steals in a game is something we rarely ever see anyways. So now, even though Draymond's amplified this style of play even more these days, I doubt we're ever going to see him have another one of these because he's not really as good as he was back then. Former NBA player Rasul Butler was a role player at best in his day, and when he played for the Toronto Raptors, he put up what has to be one of the most insulting and embarrassing stat lines out there. 0 total minutes played and 1 turnover. See, the game was about to be over, there was 4.2 seconds left on the clock, and Rasul hadn't played at all. He hadn't even touched the ball that night actually, but the Raptors sub Butler in to inbound the ball. He then gets a 5-second violation which counts as a turnover, then the coach subbed him out right after. So the dude really committed a turnover, then got subbed out without ever stepping foot on the floor, and without the clock ever actually ticking even a single second. And it kind of goes to show why the coach might not have chose to put him in that night. But speaking of zeros, in 2011, Joel Anthony once played 29 minutes in a game with the Miami Heat and recorded zeros across the board. 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 blocks, and 0 steals. And by the end of the night, it was almost as if he was virtually never even on the court and had never even played in that game. It does make sense though because he was playing with a super team, but still, he was 6'11" and didn't get a single rebound. Andre Roberson also did the same thing a few years back while he was playing with the Thunder, but he played slightly less minutes, which in a turn of events actually makes his night somehow better than Joel's. Richard Hamilton is widely remembered for his Pistons days, but one specific game he had isn't talked about enough, because in 2005 against the Grizzlies, he went 0 for 10 from the field but finished with 14 points, going 14 from the free throw line. So he went 0% from the field and 100% on free throws. How does that even happen? Was he having a great shooting night or a terrible one? Usually it's one or the other, you know, if you're making shots, you're also making your free throws, and vice versa, but Hamilton combined the two. And not only that, but what makes this night even weirder was that the starting lineup for Detroit had 4 All-Stars in it, but Rip led his team in scoring that night. Without even making a field goal, he led the team, which is terrible. And to nobody's surprise, in that game, the Pistons were blown out. But speaking of free throws, we have Corey Maggette, and he had a pretty similar night, but this one may be even a little bit weirder, because you see, back in 2010, he played in 14 minutes off the bench, and within that time finished the game with 17 points, going 0 of 2 from the field, but 17 of 20 on free throws. So they basically had to have just fouled him on every single shot he took, except for 2 that night, and he went 85% from the line. So he also didn't make a single actual shot a game. And it was even more strange for this one, given the fact that he came off the bench and played such little minutes. I mean, on paper, you would have think that you were using the hack-a-shack on him, but they weren't. Then now let's stay on the theme of free throws, but end off on a positive note. Hakeem Olajuwon was known for doing crazy things on the court and always filling up the stat sheet. But in one particular game, he kinda did that, because he finished off the night with 48 points, but didn't make or even take a single free throw, which is by far the record for most points without an extra point being made. And his official box score for the night was 48 points on 24 of 40 from the field with 0 free throws, which means there were no threes either, which was typical for Hakeem, but he just straight up made 24 shots, no one fouled him, and he went on with his day. So technically he set this record, but I think the other team deserves a little shout out on this one too. What's your pick for the all-time strangest stat line in the history of the league? Comment down below and let me know. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you next video.